The Thing, 1982 movie review. So this is actually a movie from my youth. I was a child of the 1980s. Although I say movie from my youth, I actually never saw this in the 1980s. My parents would never have allowed this. You remember maybe that this movie had a reputation back in its day for being a shocking movie and a gross out movie. A reputation not entirely undeserved. So like I definitely couldn't see this when I was a kid. But I do definitely remember it being talked about on the playground. You know, the kids whose parents did let them see it were telling the rest of us all about all the gross scenes and stuff like that. So I've got some memories of hearing about this film secondhand. Around the time I was 12, I did actually see the 1952 movie, on which this is based, kind of. When I was about 11, 12, 13, I became a fan of the old black and white 1940s, 1950s horror movies, which back at that time used to be rerun on the AMC cable channel a lot. I'm not sure if they still do it. But yeah, the Thing from Outer Space, or sometimes just The Thing it's known as, the original 1952 version is known, was shown on TV, and I watched it, and I felt like I had seen the original, so why bother with the crappy remake, right? I had kind of a purist attitude towards movies back in those days, which I must have picked up from, you know, the older adults around me or something like that. That the original was always superior, the remake was always inferior and a cash grab, and you know, it substitute gross out stuff for genuine suspense. But then I've noticed over the years that this movie, the 1982 version, actually does have a very good reputation among film buffs. It seems to have, its reputation has improved a lot with age. Also, the director of this, John Carpenter, seems to be very well respected with film buffs. I'm ashamed to say that prior to this, I've never seen any movies by him. But then I was watching Planet Terror, which I've just reviewed recently on this channel. And on the audio DVD director's commentary to that, the director Robert Rodriguez kept talking about how much he was influenced by John Carter movies. And I thought to myself, I really ought to see one of a John Carter movie one of these days. So I went back to the video store, and this was it. I think this is probably the most famous John Carter movie out there, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's the best, but this is definitely the most famous thing he's done. It also stars Kurt Russell. And Kurt Russell is an actor who has some nostalgic value for me. My parents, like I said, would not allow me to watch these modern horror films, but I grew up watching the Disney Channel in the 1980s. And the Disney Channel back in the 1980s, they had a slightly different format than they do nowadays. They used to just replay old movies from the Disney Vault. And Kurt Russell was a Disney child star in the late 60s, in the 70s. He did a number of kind of teen movies. Which, if you're not familiar with them, I don't know if I'd recommend them per se, but they've gotten a certain charm worth checking out. So anyways, I remember Kurt Russell from all those teen Disney movies, and I was thinking, oh, cool, you know, be neat to see him in kind of something more adult. He's done a number of more adult stuff since then, but anyways. So I rented the DVD of this movie. DVD here, at least the one I rented, was chocked full of extras. There's a commentary track which has not only John Carpenter but Kurt Russell on it, the two of them doing a dual commentary. There's an hour-and-a-half documentary on the making of the Thing, which is interesting because if you see this movie, you know there's so many special effects on it. But this was all the way back in 1982, before CGI or any of that. Unfortunately, the making of documentary is mostly just talking heads. So you don't actually get to see so much how they did the special effects. People just explain how they did the special effects. But I think this is just a casualty of the fact that this DVD came out 20 years after the film was originally made. So, it's not like they weren't filming special things just for the DVD back in 1982. So presumably all they had left was some still photographs and people who could talk through what it was. But anyways, the DVD gives quite a treatment. You feel like this is a classic movie that's being treated with a lot of respect. Something I didn't fully appreciate until I saw this DVD with all the extra features on it is that this is actually not so much a remake of the 1952 version. It's actually based on a short story, which I didn't even realize, which, if memory serves, the short story is called Who Goes There? Or something like that. And the short story was the basis for the 1952 movie. And also the basis for the 1982 movie. But the 1982 movie much more closely aligns with the original short story. So the 1952 movie, which is worth watching if you haven't seen it. It's dated, obviously, not at all scary by today's standards, but it has its moments. It's got some nice atmosphere to it. But anyways, the 1952 movie is just kind of a standard monster movie. So the Thing is lumbering around like this big monster. But actually in the original short story, apparently, the Thing was a shapeshifter. So it could take the form of different people, and you didn't actually know who the Thing was. I mean, it could be any of the people in the room with you. One of them could be the Thing disguised as a human, which obviously adds a whole nother element to the story. And the 1982 version is the one that's more faithful to the original short story. So it's not just like this big monster lumbering around. It's this suspense. It's kind of like that Agatha Christie book, 10 Little Indians, where the killer's in the room, but you don't know who he is. Or maybe it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where the alien is taking over the bodies of other people. Or a combination of the two, I guess. But that brings a lot more suspense into it. And then, at various points, they'll kind of figure out that the Thing is disguised as a certain human being, or an event will trigger the Thing to come out. And this is where all the gross stuff comes, is the bodies would just kind of explode into this big mass of goo and stuff like that. Again, very impressive technical effects, considering that this was all done in 1982. But yeah, you can definitely see where this movie has a reputation for being gross out. By today's standards, of course, it's pretty tame, but I think for 1982, this was definitely something new for audiences. I'm reminded, I'm going to make a digression here. I'm reminded of a comment that one of my teachers made. This was my 7th grade music teacher, and she was showing us the movie West Side Story. As part of the music curriculum, we had to watch a musical every year. And when she introduced the movie, she was kind of apologetic. And she said, now look, when people die in this movie, spoilers, there's no blood, there's no guts, there's no gore. And she said that bothered me a little bit at first because it didn't seem real. But she said, in modern movies nowadays, when somebody dies, you're so busy getting grossed out that you don't realize that, hey, this person is actually dead. Like, the weight of that death doesn't actually impact you. So she said, like, an old movie like West Side Story in that respect was much preferable because in the absence of any gore, you were able to process that, hey, this person is really dead now. I thought about this when watching The Thing because I think certainly in this movie, when somebody dies, and they actually don't die on screen, what happens is it's revealed that they have died maybe in a previous scene and that the Thing is now occupying their body. But when that body kind of explodes into the monster, you are so busy being grossed out or impressed by the special effects that you completely do not register like, hey, wait a minute, this character is dead now. And the thing about this movie is it's not like, you know, people usually say with horror movies that the characters are just throwaway characters and, you know, they're just bland characters that just exist to get killed. That's not true of this movie. The first half of the movie, they actually do spend a lot of time developing these characters, and these are fairly rich characters. But then you totally do not get any chance to process that, oh, this character is actually dead now, because you're so busy being distracted by the special effects. So, I'm not sure if I'd call that a negative exactly, but it is something I've noticed. Anytime you watch a classic movie like this, and I think this is, even though this movie is younger than me, I think this is a classic nowadays, certainly. You're catching all these references to stuff that you've seen before and just didn't realize what it was a parody of. For example, after having seen this movie, I thought, I've seen this scene parodied before in South Park. You know, and I completely didn't catch that it was a parody of The Thing at the time. There were all sorts of moments like that throughout this movie. It's one of those movies that's been so heavily parodied that you're probably already familiar with a lot of it without even knowing it, if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, it's definitely recommended. So yeah, check it out if you haven't seen this movie.